a lot of interesting things going on. Thought it would be a good idea because I'm having a hard time keeping track of a lot of stuff. That it would be good to condense down for people who are not able to keep track of all the stuff. A week ago, briefly, martial law in South Korea. The president, I think, lost an election and claimed that there were people in the government that were sympathizers to China and North Korea. This was in South Korea, which is definitely not communist. And the parliament tried to supersede the presidential order of martial law, and then that was overridden by another part of the government or something. I don't really know what's going on there beyond that. How long that lasted, if that's still happening. That's outgoing party lame duck president throwing a tantrum, perhaps. I don't know. France, their elections have utterly shifted the balance of power in their parliament. They have fired their prime minister, and it's possible that the French president may actually resign as well. In Syria, some dudes, rebels, have toppled the government of Syria. The president, Bashar al-Assad, is in Moscow, Russia, seeking asylum or shelter of some sort. That government is no more. It turns out that country has been run by a dynastic family, and that there have been a lot of unethical things done to the people. So, at the same time, this is something that a lot of war hawks and neoconservatives and neoliberals have pushed for. So, I feel like with the election passed and the results in, and future plans stated, and other countries making contact and reaching out. There were stories of possible ceasefire being reached in Gaza. Have no freaking idea what's going to end up happening in Ukraine, because the outgoing administration, in their own little way of throwing a tantrum, have escalated things. And now one of the things that they wanted in Syria just happened. What's happening in France is not friendly to them. I don't know what South Korea does with that alignment. Right-wing populism is growing in Canada. They're going to have some kind of a Trump moment in their next elections. And their soon-to-be outgoing government is going to dig their heels in and resist. They are stubborn, obstinate people. They are really good. If you've seen Trudeau, you've seen how good that guy is at lying. Nationally, we have that insurance CEO murderer having been arrested, supposedly, allegedly. As of a few hours ago, it was reported that that individual had possession of a 3D printed pistol. It was not the manual action B&T or whatever that everyone was saying it was. Grand Thumb made a really good video about this with some theorizing prior to the announcement of the arrest and the possession of this 3D printed gun. No details that I've heard yet about what specifically, like what type or style of gun it was. Grand Thumb's theory was that there was a homemade suppressor involved that lacked a particular piece that allows a semi-automatic slide-style pistol with the tilting barrel to fire and recoil and go back into battery and fire again properly. And absent that, perfectly explains the specific actions that took place during the event itself as shown on video, because the guy's right under a camera when he does it. And so it's possible there's going to be some type of push to ban 3D printed guns or suppressors or whatever on the horizon there. The Democrat Party is currently engaged in a civil war with itself. The leadership, the representation, the messaging, I think, is all going to have to change. Don't know if that's going to matter. Don't know if it'll be any good or not. Right now, it appears that their entire business is campaign fundraising Ponzi scheme with appendant political functions, which are kind of required in order for the fundraising to be legit. That being the people they put into power. So I don't know if that needs to be remade, repackaged, rebadged, so much as recycled. The same day they arrested the shooter of that CEO was the day of the acquittal of Daniel Penny, who had held a homeless person that was on a subway being loud and aggressive and whatever in a restraining position until they got to the next stop. And the homeless person subsequently died at the hospital, but it was a politicized trial, a lot of attempts at ruining a man's life failed. Ultimately, the jury would not agree on, they were literally a hung jury, 6-6, and not moving when it came to the higher charge, which would have been basically life in prison. When that was removed from the table, they then acquitted fairly quickly of the secondary charge of negligent homicide or something, involuntary. He was acquitted. Subsequently, a bunch of political activist talking heads gave speeches. And to my knowledge, even though they were like, yeah, we're going to burn New York, I don't think New York is being burned. I think this thought occurred to me earlier tonight as well. there was very little organic with the Summer of Love riots. There were instigators, agents provocateur, and people enabling it by leaving large stacks of bricks, etc., and effectively entrapping gullible people who might decide to give in to their intrusive thoughts if they saw other people do it, because that's how mob mentality works. But even the protests themselves were fallacious because of the actual circumstances, which were, in the case of George Floyd, somewhat revealed at the trial. They never managed to pin down exactly what his cause of death was. Therefore, how can they call it a homicide? Let alone assign guilt to one person or a group of people by association. And it was a trial that I watched diligently, completely, and justice was not served. People were afraid, and they convicted because they didn't want their neighborhood to get rioted to. Since then, everybody overcame and voted out the evil orange man, and what they voted in was garbage. Hot garbage. People have come around, woken up, many of them. Some not, but not particularly the dangerous ones or ones who would do anything but participate if 1,000 other people were already doing it. And so all the by large mansions stuff was already exposed. People are aware of that. The fact that these people basically cashed in and vanished. And people ultimately, I think, have gotten fed up with a lot of this ridiculous ideology and ideological capture of the mainstream, that they are rejecting it. At least enough, resisting it, to push back against the suggested recourses that are presented in the media as if they're about to happen. And the reason I see it the way that I do is that I know that there were real people participating in some of that anarchy. I believe there were some folks that I was driving around in the cab that were talking about going up to Minnesota to visit family at a time when this thing was still happening, and also talking about getting new shoes. And these people were, I guess, in a position to afford to do that and to not really give a shit about it. And I think now, this time around, nobody's going that way to loot out New York. Certainly not in the middle of winter. It'll have cooled down by the summer. And unless they come up with a reason to do something over the summer, and even then, it's possible that more people will be like, I don't trust that that's something that's real. Could be talk around the table. But I think people realize finally, a large number realize that they have been had. We've all been had. Everyone, myself included. I've understood this and acknowledged it long ago, and I still have to, triple check myself to make sure that I've not been had. But we all have to admit that we've been had. That a lot of what people have thought was true was some bullshit. And not only that, but that a lot of our moderation of behavior, of how we are accustomed now to speaking and thinking, is directly tied to how we must conduct ourselves on social media so as not to get deleted from the platform and therefore lose access And I think people are starting to wake up to that realization, to understand that this conditioning has been going on. And it's never too late to say no to that conditioning. So that's what I got for this video. There's a bunch of crazy stuff going on. Things are in flux. It's easiest to control people by fear, so they want you to be nervous and afraid. I say instead be frosty. Be aware. You can be confident, and having nerves is fine. That just means that you're paying attention all the time.